Hi, I'm Hector Garcia, CPA and Advanced QuickBooks Pro Advisor. And one of the main things that I do for my clients is to help them choose the right app to add to QuickBooks Online to solve specific pain points around expense management. When we think of expense management pain points, we think of three things. One, the actual collection of receipts, invoices, bills, and other documents related to paying an expense. Two, the process of digitalization of those documents and approval for payment and eventually the payment itself. And three, the coding or classification of those expenses into the books. So when it comes to an expense management app for QuickBooks, two major applications come to mind. One is called Expensify. So I'm going to click on the Apps tab on the left-hand side, and then I'm going to search Expensify. There's Expensify. And the other one is Bill.com. Bill.com is actually labeled Pay Bills for QuickBooks Online and Bill.com Complete. It's actually one app that comes in two different formats. One is a full app, and the other one is built into QuickBooks Online interface. Let's go ahead and get started with Expensify. In this demo of Expensify, which will take about 15 minutes, we're first going to do an app setup and a general overview. Then we're going to show you how to send a receipt or a bill to Expensify via email. Then we're going to show you how to submit an expense for approval or payment. Then we're going to show you how to enter a manual expense to submit to Expensify. Then we're going to create reports and work with existing expense reports. Then we're going to show you how to reimburse an expense from Expensify, which could be done electronically. Then we're going to show you how to modify an existing expense report, followed by exporting an expense report into QuickBooks Online so you can see the workflow between Expensify and QuickBooks. And finally, how to change a company policy and settings. It is important to note that we're setting up Expensify from the perspective of a small business user. If you're an accounting professional, you may need to request administrative access to be able to add this app to your client's QuickBooks file. We're going to go ahead and click on Get App Now and then Connect. And once we log into Expensify, we're essentially going to see three options on the left-hand side. We're going to see our inbox, our expenses, and reports. Inbox will contain all the pending items that were either brought into Expensify and they're not yet being classified. Also, if a receipt or bill was scanned using the smartphone and not yet classified, that would show up on the inbox as well. And another way items can show up in your inbox is if you actually forward an email you received with receipt or bill, forward it straight into a special Expensify email and it will land in that inbox. So for example, I got this bill here from Comcast or from Xfinity that I'm going to forward into the special email for Receipt Bank. So I forward that to receipts@expensify.com. And as long as I use the email address that was actually set up on the account, it will recognize that that email belongs to that account and bring that attachment into the inbox. So I click on Send. So back into Expensify. Once that email that I forwarded to Expensify gets processed, it will likely to be processed under Expenses. So I'm going to click on Expenses, and then I'm going to see it right here. It says Comcast. So I can click on Open to see what that looks like. And notice it read some major information from it. It went ahead and read the total dollar amount. It read the vendor's name. And down here in the bottom, it brought in an attachment of what that email looked like. If I scroll up and I click on the vendor's name, it will take me into a screen that allows me to edit the expense category that I want to send that expense to. So for example, it brought in the merchant's name, the date, dollar amount, and then category, it put it into utilities. So in some cases, Expensify will do a pretty good guess. And in other cases, you have to make sure that you choose the correct account so it gets categorized correctly. Over time, you can program your merchants or vendors based on policies to use specific accounts immediately so you don't have to go in and change them. From this screen, you can do a couple more things. Once you can split the expense if you want to. So by splitting the expense, you can take any amount of that bill and send it to different categories by clicking on Add Split. And we can click on Split Even, and you will see the dollar amount will break down into 4 equal parts because we entered 4 lines. Then at that point, I can choose different categories or different tags. In Expensify, a tag is used for a customer or job. So if I click on tag and I click on the drop-down menu, I'm going to get my customer or sub-customer list from QuickBooks Online. So I would choose the customer that I want to associate the expense with, and that's what the split would be for, because maybe you want to send an expense across multiple jobs for your job costing purposes. Then you click on Save. As you scroll down some more, you can add some comments. So between the expense administrator or manager and the actual person inputting the expenses, you can have communications back and forth on whether or not that expense is being approved for payment, or maybe asking for additional information, whatever the situation might be. Once you're done adding all the details of that expense that you want to submit for approval, you can click on Print Report, and it will generate an expense report with all the details and also include all the attachments. You could also generate a PDF straight from the screen if you don't want to print it. And that's what the PDF looks like. It contains all the details and all the attachments that were used for this expense report. So at this point, if you have nothing else to add to it, we're going to click on Submit and Close. We'll click on Send, and the expense will now show up as closed. Let's go ahead and submit an expense manually. So we're going to click on the New Expense button on the top right of the screen, and we have a couple of options here. We have Manually Create, Scan Receipt, Create Multiple, or Time. Let's start with Scan Receipt. And we're going to select the receipt that we have saved into my computer. When it's done uploading, you're going to see it in Smart Scanning mode, which means that Expensify will attempt to extract the data from the receipt. I can click on Open to see what that looks like. And so far, no expenses have been recorded yet because the system is still scanning or detecting the information inside the receipt. I'm going to select this other option called Fill Out Details. That means I can manually enter the information if I don't want to wait for Expensify to finish reading and detecting the information. So under Category, I'm going to put here Meals. Under Attendees, I can put multiple attendees if I had multiple employees inside the organization attending that dinner. I'm going to select the customer and job that are associated with this expense. And then under Comments, we'll put here Discussed New Project. Then I'll click on Save. So some new information has been recorded into the receipt, but we still have to put the dollar amounts. So I'm going to click on Fill Out Details again. Then I'm going to click where it says Fill Out Details myself. Then I'm going to put here the restaurant name, the date, and the dollar amount. Once I enter these, I have two options, reimbursable or billable. Reimbursable means that an employee paid this out of pocket and the company has to reimburse or pay back. In other words, we have to create a bill in QuickBooks in our accounts payable to make sure that that employee gets reimbursed. And then billable means that we expect to get paid back from our customer. Whether or not we reimburse it to an employee, these two could actually be independent. So you have to choose at that point the proper setting. So I'm going to click on Save. And now this expense report is completed. At this point, I can click on Open. I can click on Submit and Close. I can choose who's in charge of approving this bill. I can choose if I want to attach a PDF of the expense report as well, and then click on Send. Once the approver approves the bill, this will show up as closed. And you can click on Reports, and you'll be able to see it in a report. When I open the report, I now have the option to choose what I want to do with this information in terms of sending it to QuickBooks. So when I click on Export To, at this point, I can click on QuickBooks Online. And when that is complete, you should be able to see that bill in QuickBooks Online. The next step would be reimbursing this expense. Since we marked it as reimbursable, we have to pay back the employee for this expenditure. So when you click on reimburse, you can do it in a couple ways. You can log into your bank and create the ACH transaction from your bank, or you can click on manually enter account details, enter your routing number and account number, click on save and close, and that's going to pay direct deposit the employee directly. Let's take a look at some additional reports. So I'm going to select one of these reports that were created already. And this report actually contains two different transactions. You can have more than one invoice, receipt, or expense line in a report. There's actually no limit on how many expense lines you can have in a report. In this particular case, there's 2 lines requested to be reimbursed on this expense report. So I'm going to click on the first one. We got the payee name. We have the receipt here on the right-hand side. And under category, I'm going to put the correct category. And this is based on my chart of accounts for QuickBooks Online. And then on the comments, I'll put dinner after training. And then click on save. Then I'm going to click on the second line. Also select the category. And then click on save. And once this report has the correct categories, we will click on export to and click on QuickBooks Online. If we go back into QuickBooks and click on our recent transactions, I'm going to open one of the expense reports that was submitted through Expensify. I notice that every line item that was put in Expensify comes right into a QuickBooks bill. And you can also click on any of the attachments, and anything that was a picture or a scan taken into Expensify will flow through QuickBooks Online as well. The other really nice thing about it is in the memo, you get a full link to see your actual Expensify memo. So if I copy that link and paste it into my browser, it will take you straight into the Expensify report that was set up earlier. Lastly, let's take a look at the settings. So when I click on settings and I click on policies, there should always be a default policy set up, which is going to contain all of the settings for the Expensify to work on. You can actually create multiple policies if you want to program Expensify to work in different ways. But I just have the one policy for my company. So I'm going to click on that. And let's go through the settings. I'm going to click on expenses. There's a couple of key settings here. Expense violations allows Expensify to flag expenses that fall within a specifically set threshold. For example, how old the expense is or the dollar amount will trigger a violation outside policy, automatically flag the expenses, and then allow the manager to make a decision on whether or not to pay one of these expenses. On the reports, you can change the home currency for all the reports. You can also automatically schedule all the expenses to be submitted for approval based on your specified time frame. Under connections, we can see that Expensify can connect to QuickBooks Online and other accounting systems as well. There are some really great QuickBooks app partners such as Bill.com, Gusto, and T-Sheets. These are third-party apps that add additional functionality to QuickBooks, and it's great to see that Expensify could talk to those apps as well. Let's go to categories, and this will be your general ledger or your chart of accounts from QuickBooks, and you can actually pick and choose which accounts from your general ledger you would like to make available for folks to choose when they're categorizing expenses. So I could simply get rid of some of these expense categories, and they will no longer be available for the end users to pick as the categorization of the expenses. Under tags, you're essentially going to see the entire customer or sub-customer job list. You can pick and choose which customers you would like to enable in Expensify so users can job cost those expenses to. And you can also add a setting to force the user to have to pick a customer job because the expenses all have to do with the project. Under people, this is where you can add all the users within your organization, and you can choose which of these users are employees, policy administrators, or auditors. So you can set up different layers of permission structure to let Expensify know which employee is allowed to do what function inside Expensify. You scroll down, you're going to see approval mode. So this is where we can choose how expenses get approved. So for example, under submit and close, there's no second layer of administrator that actually approves the bills. If I click on submit and approve, you will change the workflow and now require one of the end users to submit the expense and a manager to approve it before it gets scheduled to be paid or scheduled to be synced into QuickBooks. And under advanced approval, you will create multiple layers to set up direct reports, employees that only get accepted through a certain group of managers or administrators. It has a lot of in-depth capability to set up policies around that. On the reimbursement, you can set up how you're going to reimburse your employees. So will you reimburse them through Expensify directly by submitting an ACH payment into the employees, or would you just write them a check to reimburse them? You can choose how Expensify tracks those reimbursements for those expense reports. So in summary, what does Expensify solve for? Expensify allows a multi-user organization to submit bills and expenditures, either to go through an approval process before they get submitted into QuickBooks, or to go through a reimbursable process so we can reimburse manually or use the Expensify ACH system to reimburse those employees for those expense reports. The next app is Bill Pay with QuickBooks Online. We're going to click on Apps on the left-hand side. Then I'm going to search Pay Bills. And you're going to see an app called Bill Pay for QuickBooks Online and Bill.com. There's actually two apps with two different functions. And then you're going to have two options. Click on Get Bill.com or Get Bill Pay. We're going to go ahead and use Get Bill Pay. Click on that. In this demo of Bill Pay for QuickBooks Online, which should take about 10 minutes, we're first going to do an app setup and general overview. Then we're going to show you how to make vendor payments. Then we're going to track those payments and track the payment status. Then we're going to show you how to manage vendors' accounts and inviting vendors to set up their own account via Bill.com so it can automatically update to your QuickBooks and you can pay them electronically. Then we're going to show you how to invite multiple vendors in batch so they can set up their own electronic accounts. And finally, we're going to review the transactions in QuickBooks Online that were created via Bill Pay so you can see the workflow. It is important to note that we set up this app from the perspective of the small business user. If you're an accounting professional, you may need to get administrative access in order to add this app to your client's file. And once you go to the entire setup process, you're going to be ready to pay bills online. It's going to ask you for your company information, bank account information, and you're going to have to verify to make sure your bank is linked to QuickBooks Online in such a way that you can make electronic payments with this app. And once you have the app activated, we're going to click on the Quick Create button. We're going to go down to where it says Pay Bills Online. That will take us into a new screen that has three tabs: Make Payment, Send Payments, and Manage Vendors. Under Make Payment, we're simply going to select the vendor that we want to pay. We'll hit the checkbox on whether or not we want to track this payment as a 1099 payment. We'll select the dollar amount and optionally a bill number. Then we select the expense category and then we click on Next. It's going to give us two options. We can either do a direct bank transfer, which is going to require us to put the vendor's routing and bank account number, or we can select check. And this service will actually print out a check and send it to the vendor. On the right-hand side, it will tell you the estimated arrival date. Typically, it takes about 5 days. It will ask you to review and submit the payment, and we'll click on Submit Payment. We can go into Send Payments, and we can see a history of all the payments that we have sent through this app. We can also click on Track Status and get additional information about the pending payment. And we can also click on the drop-down menu and click on Cancel Payment. Under Manage Vendors, we can click on any of the vendors in a vendor list and click on Set Up Bank Transfer. We can make electronic ACH payments as long as we have the vendor's bank information. You can also invite the vendor to receive bank transfers simply by clicking on Invite Vendor, and then we'll click on Next. The vendor will get an email with an invitation to set up the bank account, and we'll click on Send Invite. The vendor will receive an email that looks like this, and they'll be able to click on Accept Invitation, and they're going to create their own account in the Bill.com platform. So this is what it looks like from the vendor when they accept that email. Then they can answer the question that best fits them, whether they are in a business or an independent contractor or an employee of the business itself. They'll click on the right option, fill out their own contact information, and then hit Continue. Put their own bank account information and click on Finish. The vendor will continue by creating a free account in Bill.com, and they will now have their own platform that they can use to track the payments that they're getting from you directly. So when we go back into QuickBooks and pay that same vendor that has already been set up as a bank transfer, the payment process will go a lot faster. So let's see what that looks like. Now let's go ahead and pay this vendor by going into Pay Bills Online. Select our vendor, select the amount we want to pay, the expense category. We could put a memo or a bill number optionally, and then click on Next. And then you will see that the vendor's bank information is preset in the system. And we'll click on Next. And then once we're ready, Submit Payment. Now under Send Payments, you'll be able to see all the payments you've made, including the check payment we made first, and now the bank transfer payment we made second. Finally, you can invite multiple vendors in batch to create their own individual Bill.com accounts so they can verify their own bank account information and automatically set up your bill pay system in QuickBooks Online to pay them via transfer. Just click on Set up multiple vendors for bank transfers. Enter all the email addresses of the vendors that you want to send it to. And then click on Send to Invites. And it will send invitations to all those vendors that you entered in there. If you go look at the transaction individually inside QuickBooks Online, we can click on the Recent Transactions button and click on the bill. And the bill will automatically be created under the vendor's name with a bill number, which is really a tracking number. And it will be marked as paid with the payment transaction itself, which we can click on as well to see it. Immediately after you open a transaction that was paid via the bill pay system, you will have the ability to click on See Confirmation if you want to see the status of that payment. After you look at the confirmation, we can just hit either Cancel Payment if we want to cancel it, or on Close. And finally, every single payment that was generated through the pay bill system will have this tag on it that says Payment Sent, letting you know that this was an electronic payment and with a payment confirmation number that you can click on to see the status. So Bill Pay for QuickBooks Online is a built-in integrated app in which you actually don't have to leave QuickBooks Online in order to interact with it, giving you the ability to seamlessly pay your vendors, either through a physical check that your bank will send to your vendors or directly through an electronic payment in which you can set up yourself by entering the vendor's bank account information or inviting them to set up a login in their own platform where they can manage those payments and payment information themselves. This app is great to make simple payments straight from QuickBooks from your bank account. And as long as you're in administrative access in QuickBooks Online, you'll be able to generate those payments. The next app is Bill.com. To set up the Bill.com app, we're going to click on the Apps tab on the left-hand side. And then we're going to search Bill.com. The search results will say Bill Pay for QuickBooks Online and Bill.com. In this demo of Bill.com, which will take about 9 minutes, we're first going to do an app setup and general overview, followed by creating and approving bills within Bill.com. Then we're going to pay some of those approved bills, followed by reviewing the payment history. Then we're going to create a bill inside QuickBooks Online and pay it via Bill.com. Then we're going to view a couple of reports, And finally, we're going to upload bills manually into Bill.com. Throughout the entire presentation, you'll be seeing how QuickBooks Online and Bill.com interact together. It is important to note that we're setting up this app from the perspective of the small business user. If you're an accounting professional, you may need to get administrative access in order to set up this app for your customers. And on the app information page, we're going to click on getbill.com. We're going to click on connect. Another way to upgrade to Bill.com would be to click on the create button and click on pay bills online. And this is only relevant if you already had set up the free pay bills account. If you already had that set up, you would simply click on upgrade, or here where it says learn more about Bill.com. It will send you straight to the upgrade page. It will say upgrade to advanced bill pay, which is basically the Bill.com app. You will click on upgrade to Bill.com, which will add that fourth tab called advanced, which will give you a direct link where you click on go to advanced bill pay, which will essentially be your full-fledged Bill.com app. And when you first get into Bill.com, it will take you to a get started checklist where you can set up additional users that will be able to access Bill.com on their bank account. You will go through the process of entering your bank information and complete with the verification process. And click on get started. You can also set up a separate user as the approval for the bills. And you can enable automated invoicing because you can use Bill.com to also generate invoices automatically and create electronic and automated payments from your customers. Once your setup is complete, you can start using Bill.com in different ways. For example, I'm going to create a bill within Bill.com simply by clicking on Bills, enter a bill, click on Invite Vendor to receive ACH payment. The bill will now be listed in the list of bills to be paid. Essentially, the user set up to approve these bills is going to log into Bill.com, click on the bill, and then click on Approve. And once it's approved, either the approver clicks on Review and Pay, or the originator of the bill will click on Review and Pay. By default, if the vendor is not set up with their bank account information, Bill.com will do a check as a default payment type. On the right-hand side, you can see where it says Payment Method Check. If you want to set up the electronic payment, we can click on where it says Set up Electronic Payments, have the vendor's email address there, and eventually when the vendor gets to set up their own account with the bank account information, you'll be able to pay them electronically. For the time being, because they're set up as a check, we're going to go ahead and click on Pay. You'll get a confirmation of the payment that has been scheduled. And then we'll click on Done. Where it says Payments Out, you will see a history of any payments that were created, voided, canceled, or deleted, including the ones that are scheduled to be paid in this page. Now let's create the bill over in QuickBooks Online. I'm going to switch over to QuickBooks Online. I'm going to click on Create Bill. Select the vendor, the account, and dollar amount, and click on Save and Close. And you will notice that the bill that we created in QuickBooks Online transfers over to Bill.com immediately, which at this point we can click on Review and Pay, select the date, add a memo optionally, and then click on Pay. And once the payment is made, we can go back to QuickBooks Online. We can click on the Recent Transactions icon and click on that bill payment check that we just created for a partial payment. Immediately after you open the transaction, you will see that it says Payment Sent with a date and allows you to click on See Confirmation. So I can take you straight into the page which will confirm that an electronic payment has been created for this particular bill. I'll click on Close. Then under Reports, We can view a report of bill payments or unpaid bills. Click on View. You'll have a list of all the bill payments that were generated for the date range that we requested. Another way to use Bill.com is to upload the receipt or the invoice directly into Bill.com and follow the workflow from there. So I'm going to click on the Inbox button on the left-hand side. I'm going to click on Browse Computer. Select the receipt I want to upload. And there's the bill that I just uploaded. So what Bill.com will do is it will attempt to extract some of the key information from the vendor bill. So you as the end user don't have to key in every piece of information. The reads are not perfect, but it will certainly speed up your process versus entering it by hand. If you don't want to wait for the information to be extracted digitally, we can click on Enter Bill Manually. We can create our own vendor name, enter our own invoice number, our own invoice date, due date, dollar amount, expense category, and finally click on Save. When I go back into Bills, the newly entered bill goes into the queue. Once it's time to pay it, we follow the same process. Click on the bill, click on Review and Pay, double check bank information, date, address, and then we'll click on Pay. Finally, I can also take an invoice that I received via email and forward it to the custom Bill.com alias that we set up during the setup process. Once you click on Send from your email, you will see the invoice that came from your email. You can either wait for the extraction to take the data out and attempt to automatically create that for you, or you can click on Enter Bill Manually and enter all the details yourself. So Bill.com is a great platform to manage bills, approvals, and payments as a total accounts payable management system. In contrast with the basic bill pay for QuickBooks Online, which uses essentially the same Bill.com platform. This one's really meant when you have more than one person either entering bills, approving bills, or actually creating the payments to pay those bills. Whereas the light version of the app, Bill Payment for QuickBooks Online, is best for the smaller companies in which one person, the administrator, manages bills and payments all at the same time. And regardless which app you're going to go for, or whether you use a combination of apps, strongly consider using expense management apps to help you organize and authorize future accounts payable, and also automate both your expense management systems and accounts payable systems, making you a much more efficient QuickBooks user.